David Brewster here with the Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is picking technique. And I've had lots of students and friends and peers ask, about picks, picking techniques, and different things they could practice, kind of help improve, their picking technique and approach on guitar. And this is really, kind of frustrating and a little bit confusing too, because we have different terminology and different ways you can pick the strings, and that includes alternate picking, economy picking, sweep picking, hybrid picking, cross picking, finger picking. I mean, you name it, there's a lot that kind of, surrounds this topic. And this lesson is going to basically talk a little bit about picks. We're also going to dive into some exercises and workouts that's going to help shape up your technique and maybe just present things in a little different way where, some of the viewers out there might actually make some progress or some strides, in a new direction with their picking. So here we go. As far as picks themselves, I'm actually a pick, connoisseur, I guess. I do have a collection of picks that used to reside over here where Jeff Beck is now, but I do have a pick collection over there on the wall, and I've been collecting those since I was a teenager. So picks are cool. I've always liked picks. Going to like NAMM shows or a convention and you grab a big handful of, picks from different booths, or just, maybe you're playing a gig and you're looking around on the floor and you spot a pick from a band that played, in the same venue or something, or you go to a concert and, a guitarist throws a pick and you grab one. So it is really, it's exciting, it's interesting, there's different textures, different colors, obviously different materials the picks are made from. And I personally use Hawk picks. I'm endorsed with Hawk picks, which are over in England. I've talked about Hawk picks, several times on this channel, and I'm going to continue to talk about them because they're great picks. And, here's the late night lessons, kind of official Hawk pick. And these are an ebony composite. There's also an ivory composite as well, and different, materials, and they have different bevel options and stuff. But Hawk's really cool, and there's one of my Brewha picks. But there's just something about these. I really like the connection with the string. It seems to pop, or it kind of really does seem to just kind of, pop out whenever you use these on the strings. And whether you're picking through a scale or part of a solo or something, you can really tell, like when it makes contact with the string, it seems to really jump. And, I did use, different brands and different types for many years, but I've been using these for about 5 or 6 years now, and I love them. And I've noticed that I pretty much only use Hawk picks these days, even though I have, stashes of picks around in my studio. But these are what I usually, go for. So for you yourself, you might want to experiment, try different sizes. These are kind of more or less a jazz size, compared to like the standard, pick size that's available. But there's teardrop, and there's triangles, and there's thumb picks, and all sorts of things available. So if you haven't really found a pick that you really like, I suggest, either go into a music store and just, buy an assortment, or maybe, order, from an online retailer somewhere, and really just try, and I have noticed, certain brands have like little sample packs with different gauges and different materials, and those kind of things are really great to help you understand or find, the perfect pick. So one thing I wanted to say before we jump into the examples and the exercises, and I haven't really seen very many people, say this, at least not on camera, but everybody does this differently. And I've noticed this kind of trend in recent years, especially when I notice, comments and conversations online. It seems like people are trying to find this universal one way to do almost anything. Like one way to pick, or one way to fret, or you know what I mean? And it just seems very limiting, where I'll just be honest, I don't just limit myself to one picking style. I've spent, decades of my life, studying the style and playing habits of certain guitarists. And if you notice, like Steve Vai or Van Halen or Steve Morse or John Petrucci or Frank Gambale or Pat Metheny, or really any, famous guitarist, Marty Friedman, there's a whole bunch of different players with different techniques. They hold their hand and wrist differently. They hold their pick differently. And, some people I've noticed they haven't even really zoomed in and really watched, certain guitarists play. So to kind of help some of you that haven't really done this before, I made these kind of visual like quizzes or whatever for this episode. So here's an image with some famous guitarists, and you may be able to spot who it is just by their guitar. I couldn't really edit the guitar out. So some of these are really obvious because when you see the guitar, you know who it is. But don't be distracted by the guitar. Look at their picking hand, you know, and really like maybe pause the screen and really look at their hand. Now these are just the images, and then later, like at the end of the video, I'll give the answers. And we're going to have 2 rounds of this, so this is round 1, but name that pick hand. So like I mentioned, we're going to have another round of name that pick hand later in the video, and the answers will be at the end. But the main thing that you're going to, gain from really looking, whether it's video footage or photographs, or maybe you're standing across from the player, but if you really watch, whether it's their fret hand or their picking hand, you'll notice certain little things. Some guitarists use their thumb kind of wrapped around the fretboard. Other guitarists never do that. And, some guitarists, when they're picking, they'll basically use their thumb and index finger like that. Some players I've seen, kind of use their index, middle, and thumb like that. And then there's like different ways of holding the wrist, and I've noticed like whenever Van Halen would do tremolo picking, his hand would literally float, above the strings, and he'd kind of hold the pick, basically like this, which is really unusual, especially for muting and keeping things clean. I never really understood that. Marty Friedman's another one, has this weird kind of crab claw kind of thing going on, which is so bizarre, but it works for him. Just like Van Halen's, kind of floating tremolo picking thing. And that's the important thing to remember is don't worry so much about what someone else is doing. I mean, you can definitely watch them or ask questions or try to absorb, ideas, but don't try to be someone else. Be yourself. Find your own picking technique. Find things that work for you, whether it's tone or technique or whatever it is. But be yourself. Find yourself, because the answers, as far as your musical world are right there in front of you. But it does seem like a lot of people are so distracted and they want to mimic, or almost copy themselves, based around another player. But you don't want to do that. You want to be yourself and be, unique and an individual. And that includes picking too. Alternate picking is what we're going to hit first. And I did actually create a Pick 'em All episode. I think that was last October during, Metal Month. And that lesson actually kind of talks about James Hetfield and downstroke picking. So if you haven't seen Pick 'em All yet, after this episode, search around on the channel and you'll find Pick 'em All. And I have mentioned, exercises and some picking, scattered in various other episodes. So just dive into some of the old, content on the channel, and you'll find more to kind of fuel this topic or this subject. But the first thing we're going to do, we're going to basically be in F sharp minor, and I just kind of randomly picked that key. And, if you think of pentatonic scales on guitar, which are very popular and common, pentatonics are really easy to alternate pick through because you have an even number of notes per string. And if you're doing, pure alternate picking, like with F sharp minor pentatonic right here, it's uniformed. It definitely lends itself to be played that way because you have basically a downstroke and an upstroke on every string. Like that, down, up, down, up, down, up, all the way through. But then if we convert that to, say, the natural minor, like Aeolian in F sharp, and if we play that 3 notes per string, then we're going to have odd, groupings of notes per string, and that's going to create this really kind of unusual thing with your picking hand. And I've noticed a lot of students I've worked with over the years, this type of, problem area is usually the cause of some of their picking, issues. So if we change that to F sharp Aeolian, we'd have this. Just converting F sharp minor pentatonic to F sharp Aeolian. A 5-note scale is turned into a 7-note scale. One more time there. Going to go nice and slow through this lesson. I'm not going to try to impress anybody. I'm trying to help, viewers out there. So we're just going to take it real casual here. We're not going to turn into Chris and Pelletieri or anything. Even though that would be awesome if I could just turn everybody into Chris and Pelletieri, including myself. But anyway, right there you can see we had, 3 notes per string all the way up a 2-octave, F sharp Aeolian scale. And when you're looking at your picking hand really carefully, you can see we're doing down, up, down. And then when you move to the D string, you know, if you're doing, you know, strict alternate picking, you're going to start on that string with an upstroke. So right there, that basically creates a situation known as outside picking. You have inside picking and outside picking, and we're going to dive into that pretty heavy in a minute. But just keep in mind, like if you really notice your picking hand with strict alternate picking, that's what's happening there. Down, up, down, up, down, up. And then it basically kind of alternates between those two patterns where you have down, up, down, up, down, up, and then you have it again, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So that little inside-outside maneuver is really tricky. It feels weird, you know, if you're not really used to, you know, really honing in and noticing what's happening right there when you do that. The outside picking right there, and we're going to talk about inside and outside picking, but that's the first thing you should really think about, you know, as you play through that scale. You know, which direction is your pick going, you know, as you move from string to string, and that's picking every single note, strict alternate picking. Now, one of my favorite techniques that involves picking and also involves legato is what's known as half and half picking. And you can hear this definitely in classic, you know, Richie Kotzen and Greg Howe, and there's a whole bunch of people that do this. Van Halen did it a lot, but that's where you're picking, but you're also slurring notes in there too, and it has a smoother sound, in my opinion. And here we're going to basically, you know, we're going to hammer on after we pick the first note. We're basically doing a hammer on and then pick after that. And to my ears, that sounds a little smoother than picking every single note, which has a kind of a more of a jagged kind of staccato sound. Half and half has this kind of, you know, smoother kind of flavor. And then just pure legato, where you slur everything, you know, sounds a little blurrier, I guess you could think. Just a slight difference from half and half. Next up is a very simple exercise that's really going to help you notice this inside and outside picking situation, you know, on the guitar. And you know, the fret hand part is really simple. That way we can really just kind of watch the picking hand and really focus on our picking more. So we don't want to do anything crazy, you know, as far as the fret hand, because that's going to distract you from what you're picking. So it's basically this. We're still in F sharp. And right there I'm literally just moving between F sharp and then this trio of notes on the D string. But the important thing is to notice what your picking hand's doing right there. You're doing a downstroke on the A and an upstroke on the D. And that's outside picking, because you're picking basically on the outside of those two strings right there. Alright, so that's outside. Now inside picking would be the opposite, and what I want you to do now is we're going to start with an upstroke, and then you're going to pick the D string with a downstroke like this. And that's going to feel like your pick is trapped right there between those two strings, because it's on the inside of those two strings, the A and the D. So instead of this outside motion, we have this kind of trapped pick on the inside of those two strings. And that exercise really does kind of help you see that a little clearer. And one of those is going to feel kind of natural. The other one's going to feel really awkward, you know, unless you've already worked through that difficulty. Another thing you can do is you can actually take a riff or a lick, you know, from a famous song or something you've learned or worked on. And if it's something you already know how to play, it should be, you know, relatively easy for you to, you know, perform. But we're going to relocate it and kind of move it around on the fretboard. So take something like the riff from Crazy Train. You know, everybody watching this, I'm sure, has heard Crazy Train before. But instead of playing that riff, you know, down here near open position, we're going to relocate it up here where we just were, you know, in this F sharp minor, you know, playing position up here. So the riff from Crazy Train up an octave, and basically starting on the A string, would look like this. Now I know that's not the same as that, but there's a reason why we're playing it up here. I just wanted to kind of relocate it, to a higher position. But that's also going to reveal this inside and outside picking if you play that with strict alternate picking, because you're doing this. That first note is picked twice. If you do strict alternate picking, that's down, up, and then you're basically starting on this C sharp, with a downstroke. So there's basically a little taste of that inside picking right there. And if you do it that way, you'll notice you're picking the D string down and the A string up, and that's that inside, picking technique or motion that's really kind of confusing. Could be anything. I mean, you could take, a lick that you've written or that you've learned from somebody else. It doesn't have to be Crazy Train necessarily. I'm just using that as an example. But you can find these situations everywhere. Famous songs that you've worked on or heard before, songs that you've written or things that you've learned on the guitar. This happens all the time, especially as you move from string to string. There is a picking technique known as economy picking, which Frank Gambale definitely popularized this, back in the 80s for sure. But economy picking kind of resolves the issue with the inside-outside picking. And I'm going to go through this really slow so you can see what it is, because I know a lot of people are confused and they think economy picking is sweep picking, which it is. I mean, it's different. It's not, like, don't think Malmsteen kind of sweeps. Economy picking, you're doing little tiny sweeps if you want to think of that sweep term. But if we keep that same scale, F sharp Aeolian, and then we apply economy picking, we're going to do this, and I'm going to walk through it really slow here. So it's down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. And those little sweeps from string to string, you're basically doing 2 downstrokes in a row every time you change strings like that. Down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. And that's going to feel really weird if you're not used to doing that kind of continuous downstroke, because it definitely does. It seems like you're kind of cutting through the strings with your pick, when you economy pick like that. But check out Frank Gambale. I mean, he'll blaze through, runs and scale lines and stuff using economy picking, and it's, it'll confuse your brain or your eyes. You'll be like, what in the world? Because obviously, I mean, he's a guitar master. But he definitely did, kind of popularize that technique. We kind of reached the halfway point, so here's another round of Name That Pickhand. So here's Name That Pickhand Slight Return. Up next is a picking exercise I've given to a lot of students over the years, and this really does kind of help, kind of hone in and improve that string crossing and string to string, picking and playing. And what we're going to do is we're going to take F sharp Aeolian, and we're going to basically divide it up into little 2-string groups like this. So here's the first group. And we're literally just grabbing that F sharp and then the C sharp and D on the D string, and then we flip it where we grab this B and then this A and G sharp there on the A string. So we're really just grabbing those first 6 notes, but we're dividing them up like this. The next 2 sets of strings of F sharp Aeolian and do it again like this, and then do it again, hop over here, and the last group's going to be right here. So we literally just took that scale and then just kind of chopped it up in those little 2-string groups, and you can sit there and you can practice each one until it really starts to feel, connected or smooth like that. And you can go slow. reps like that, like maybe 4 times, with each set. But just practice that, and you could try it, in other tonalities. You can change, like the major scale or Lydian or whatever you want to do. But check that out. One riff that helped me, and it's helped a lot of students, is the opening riff from Mr. Scary, by Dokken. And when I first tackled that, I really had trouble with that constant, kind of 16th note picking. And he's also skipping strings, within the riff. And there's a bunch of examples of this. This is just one example. I Don't Know from Ozzy Osbourne's another one, with Randy and that open A string kind of alternate pick. That's a great, picking workout. The tremolo pick part from Eruption. I mean, there's a whole bunch of examples like this. But Mr. Scary is great because it's a cool riff, killer song. But it really does kind of help shape up, your picking like this. And right there, just that opening part, if you just loop this. As fast as you want. You can slow it down too. But the important thing is really try to be accurate. Your accuracy is very important with this. So don't just shred and fly through it. Really stop and look and see, what's your fret hand doing, what's your pick hand doing? Are they synchronized? Are they working together? Because they should be, definitely. But then, almost like the Crazy Train idea, you could take Mr. Scary and you could move that up an octave, kind of like what we did with Crazy Train, like this. And you can move that as high as you want to. You can move it way up, way up here. It sounds kind of funny, the higher you get up there. But the important thing here is you're finding something that you like or something that's challenging you, and then you're just tackling it head on. Instead of tiptoeing around the problem area, just barge right through that problem area like a bull, in a china shop and see what happens. As far as string skipping technique, when you're picking, and this did come up, a little bit in the recent The Secret Arpeggios of Racer X lesson that I did before this. And I had, viewers literally asking, like, hey, how did you pick through those arpeggios? So to start with this, we're going to take that F-sharp Aeolian, and we're just going to play leapfrog through it. And we've done this in other episodes, with other scales on this channel. But slowly, that would look like this. And we're literally just grabbing, a leapfrog or skipping, string to string like that. And you can pick through everything like that. You could do kind of the half and half I was talking about earlier. You could do pure, legato. You can practice that a lot of different ways. But the important thing here is, we're getting used to these jumps and leaps, moving from the A to the G, the D to the B, and then the G to the high E as you play through that. And that also exaggerates that inside-outside picking, because now you're jumping from the A to the G, and if you're doing strict alternate picking, down, up, down, then when you go to that G string, you're going to start with an upstroke. So that's that outside picking, right? Because we're basically picking down on the A and up on the G, like that. And that basically is mimicked all the way through it. The string skipping shape, we were in D minor in the Racer X lesson. Now we're in F sharp minor, in this lesson. So we're just going to move it to the right key. So that F sharp minor, string skipped arpeggio would live right here. And basically what I'm doing there, which I've been playing and practicing those arpeggios for so long, I've adapted them, and kind of brought them over to my world. I'm not really sure how Paul Gilbert himself, picks those. I just kind of have adapted them and kind of picked them or play them my way. And his way might be the exact same way. I'm not honestly sure. But for me, when I'm playing that, and those types of, string skipped arpeggios, I'm actually starting on the F sharp with a downstroke. Then I'm basically doing an upstroke on this A and then hammering on to C sharp there on the D string. And you're going to go up to the B string, that's where the string skip is. And I'm grabbing this F sharp with a downstroke and then hammering on to that A, like this. And then right there, when I come back down, I'm going to pick that A again, but I'm going to pick it with an upstroke and then pull off to that F sharp. And then I'm basically doing a really big outside picking maneuver right here because I picked up on that A, pulled off to F sharp, and then I'm grabbing the C sharp and I'm picking that with a downstroke, and then I'm going to pull off to that A note right there on the D string. So really slowly I'm doing this. There is that really big outside picking move might be really awkward, and there might be, a few spots in there where maybe you want to reverse it. Instead of picking down where I did, you might prefer to pick up. And that's the important thing there, is you're kind of finding and refining your own way of doing this, where it's comfortable, where you pick up your guitar and you just kind of effortlessly, play it, which is going to take some practice and time. But over time, if you really kind of hone in there, you'll start, whipping some of these moves out, and you won't even have to think about it. Like, your picking hand will just do it. That's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with picking technique, and we really just scratched the surface here. I didn't really dive into this as deeply as I originally wanted to, but then once I started to kind of put this together, I realized, okay, picking is a very big subject, for guitarists. And I wanted to hit, some exercises and things that I've, worked on that helped me. Also some things that, kind of helped some of the students I've worked with over the years. And there's tons. We didn't even get into sweep picking or hybrid picking. There's a bunch of stuff, finger picking, there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't even look at. But I really just want to kind of put this out there and kind of get the idea, in your mind, and start thinking about it and really start looking at what you're doing. And, hand synchronization and, picking different combinations of strings and this inside-outside, maneuvering, and a whole bunch of stuff happens. And it creates these problem areas and, technical difficulties, as you're working through some of this material. So just take it really slow, and maybe you could practice in front of a mirror if you really want to watch, your picking hand and kind of see, what you do. Obviously, you could record yourself playing guitar and kind of critique, the way your hands are working together or whatever. And there's certain strategies and things you can do to really, attack this head on and improve your ability. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.